Welcome to the Mike and Doug Show. I'm Doug. Hi, Mike.
Hello, Doug. How are you today?
I'm thrilled because you answered the question I've had for 5 years.
Really?
Yeah, I discovered the evil of ICE Incorporated, and we'll get into that in a while, and the stock market and the commodities exchange and the way that was all linked this, and then I found, I'm going, okay, this is pure evil, but I can't do anything. I can't go any further with it. But you, through your research, looking into Michael Farmer and some incredible connections to Enron and going...
Douglas, you need to show more respect. It's Lord Michael Farmer.
Lord Baron Michael Farmer, as a matter of fact, and his...
Lord Baron.
and his baronetess.
You still can't get that right.
And his baronetess, Candace Owens,
Yeah.
The baronetess will soon be, the vice presidential candidate. But
She's
anyway,
making the rounds. I saw her at when I was running last night. She was on Tucker Carlson.
if she sneezes, it gets on national news. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's British, and it all has to get British approved. As we know, all the news has to be approved out of basically the City of London. And now what you've
That's
demonstrated is, I'm going to go into an introduction on this, because once we get into the good facts, you can then lead us on this. But for years, I've told you about the book, John Coleman's book, The Committee of 300, right? And I said, I'm not going to send it to you because, it's really, there's nothing in there. It's speculation, but it sounds right. It sounds correct that the City of London rules the global economy, and that they're all connected through this magical club called the Club of the Isles, which is really Charles. Now, King Charles is the head of the Club of the Isles, and it's got the black monarchy, nobility of Europe, and as well as the existing 12 monarchs of European countries, and they all get together and they go, and you're going, oh, this
Can I stop you there, Douglas? Because I've heard you talk about this Club of the Isles forever,
Yeah.
and you haven't sent me the book yet, but you say there's 300 people. Now, I'm an organizational development guy, and I ask you a very simple question. If you got 300 people in a theater and you started talking, what's the first problem you have?
It'll never work is the first problem.
It'll never work. That's 300 people all talking at once. And so therefore you've got to break that down. And when you break it down, you're going to form some kind of hierarchy where there's going to be a few people at the top, and then they're going to break it down into smaller groups. And then eventually you'll get to the 300 people. I mean, that's true with any organization. So this notion that there's 300 people that run the world is stupid. It's not 300. It can't be.
It's basically what you've discovered. You have now discovered, usually it's, 300-400 different corporations that are all interlocked that happen to have convenient people who are on all of them and happen to be members of the Privy Council and, happen to be also connected to the manipulation of gold and happen to be Rothschild agents. So the conspiracy is, it's just those old Rothschild people. And then people get bored with that because there's no facts, there's no statistics,
Right.
There's no judicial indictable evidence here. Okay, so what you've done is you've basically now, which is the biggest bombshell. This is one of the biggest bombshells that the miners, those poor dwarfs that you keep down there just digging day and night, they have come up with my question: who owns ICE? Because ICE controls the world. ICE controls the economic. And then you looked at it and you're going, no, it's not them. It's not them. No, it's at one point it was Michael Farmer, but really Michael Farmer is controlled by another company, which you had to go in here to the SEC, and then you had to go to Company House, and then you had to go in here, and then you had to read the bottom line here, and then you had to go over here, and then finally you find out exactly who controls and how they control what the globalists want, which is a digital ID that is connected to your bank, that controls your money and also knows everything about you because of social media and all the digital information collected in your dark profile. And you have now found that is not a joke. And the mechanism for it, people barely know it exists. And if one were to say this out loud, as I did to someone who's pretty aware a little while ago, they were shocked because it was shocking to me. But then when I thought about it, I said, well, it's true from the beginning. This is the way that it was set up in Britain.
Can I frame this? Because I think we can frame it in a way that everybody's going to get it if they've done any wiring of funds in the last few years. So the banks have implemented something since 9/11 called Know Your Customer. And that sounds kind of good. And you say the banker is not supposed to send money unless they know who the person is. And they start asking questions. Well, what now is happening is the banks are becoming nosy and intrusive. And it is irritating for anybody who's trying to send money to their loved ones, to buy something, to sell something. It's called the Know Your Customer rules, and our banks are supposed to follow it. Well, what we have discovered is that it's the Know Your Customer database that is going to run the social credit score system. And that is a revelation. We always thought it was going to be Google or Facebook or Instagram or NSA, whatever, to keep all that data in one place. And what we've discovered is that no, it's not going to be any of those. Those people are going to be sharing your data with your banker. And I think here is the revelation that our bankers are going to run this social credit score system. And our bankers are going to be the key representative of the beast, the mark of the beast. I'm going to stop there because we're going to get into that.
Well, you know, when we saw people's credit scores through those two big companies all taken, we saw the data stolen from here and there and here and there and here and there. And then we heard that even the United States government, massive breaches of information that told every speck of data about every government worker, about every pension plan,
Right.
Okay, so basically we knew also that the psyops of Facebook, which is, you know, we won't get into that, but the psyops of Facebook had gathered up everything about your desires, you know, everything that you put in there. It was calculating, and it knows literally what you're going to ask next, as you put in your article. It literally can predict what you're going to do next. So they had all that, and then they were controlling us and so on and so forth. But the last piece to the puzzle, which unfortunately just became incredibly imminent, in that Biden wrote an executive order saying that by the turn of the next year, we need to be ready for a treasury generated cryptocurrency. But to do that, there's going to have to be a digital ID system. And so what you have pointed out, because I have had real problems with that, you try to take any serious money out of the bank or move any money, the manager comes out and starts harassing you, and you're going, but wait, I'm a customer. And they're going, I don't care who you are. You could be a terrorist. You could be a terrorist. You know, and that's what the Patriot Act, which you point out in your article, the Patriot Act took away all of our rights, and considered everyone a terrorist until proven otherwise. That's the way that it should be interpreted. And then there's other things. The National Defense Authorization Act has spread that even further. And the Patriot Act was changed into the U.S., whatever it is. There's a new name for it. But the point is, all those things are still in place because of terrorism, because of the attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, which we have now proven was done by the very people that you have discovered are at the core of this machine, the machination of the money machine in the city of London. And it's kind of shocking. And so I'm not yelling and screaming that this is the big revelation and big boom, as they like to call it. This is boom. No, this is a quiet explosion that the earth is like ripped in half, because now there's no more conspiracy. This is fact. So tell them who it is that really runs the world, Michael.
I think that what we see is that our banking life, our transaction life, our currency life is run out of London, and ultimately it rolls up to the Rothschild family. And their instrument for that happening is Reuters, or Thomson Reuters. And it is shocking, because if you try to trace back the history of Reuters, you can trace it back to the Rothschilds in 1850. when Reuters came to Rothschilds and asked for them to bankroll him and be his initial customer. So once the Rothschilds and the family realized that this information was a gold mine for them for controlling markets and controlling currency and transactions and metals and gold, silver, they took charge of that mechanism, made it purely about profit, which then invited the demon of mammon into the mechanism, and mammon has never left and has continued to empower that family. Now they have a lot of minions, a lot of people who are helping them do this, like J.P. Morgan, like the Rockefellers, like Warburg, like Carnegie, like the Schiffs, the one new name, the Bacharachs. So there's a group of people associated with this. But when you look at the core of what is happening right now, the shocking thing for me was after the revelations of the metals market and Lord Michael Farmer and how he was using the gold and silver in these fake or real, probably both, gold mines and using those as collateral against loans, you start looking at, okay, that's a part of the banking system. So what I don't exactly remember how we started looking at the stock exchange. I think it was you. You talked about the CD and Company, SCDE, CEDE company, that somehow was this master intermediary between a buyer and a seller in the transfer of stocks or cash or anything else. So we started looking into that, and wouldn't you know it, the clearinghouse that we ended up discovering, which is well known, DTCC, the Depository Trust
Clearing Corporation.
Clearing Corporation, right, handles the intermediary for all transactions of stocks and bonds and currency. So we started looking into that DCC company, which on the surface looks like a government entity. But the more we started looking at, the more we realized that this is sort of this is a fascist organization that is comprised of certain of our banks and the government. The government's got the majority share. These banks have the minority share. And so that's one good sign there's something wrong with this. In their fascist, it's not a competitive environment. Only certain banks get to play with this system. And of course, with that kind of information is power, because you can always be there in advance of a trade or following a trade to make sure you win and the other person loses. So we started looking at this DCC company and the organizations that they were buying up and taking control of. And then after about a decade, we see that they form a limited liability company, a joint venture with a company called Clarion, I forgot the name of it, Clarion Systems Incorporated, or LLC. And this company was in charge of developing the database called the Know Your Customer database, the KYC database. That was its task, was to develop that. In the process of developing that, they bought a company in England called Avox Limited. And Avox Limited had already been working on a Know Your Customer database in England and was implementing that in England and in Germany and the rest of Europe. And they were controlled by Borsch, the German, I'm going to say the Frankfurt stock market. They were controlled by the Frankfurt stock market. And if you recall, Frankfurt is where Amschel Rothschild got his start. And that's where he formed the Illuminati. That's where he funded Frankist Sabbateanism. Sabbatean Frankism, which was this anti-religion religion. So that was troublesome, that this German stock market was controlling what was going on in England. And then all of a sudden we see DTCC in New York purchase this AVOX Limited and bring it in within the system of database banking systems in the US. And then, wouldn't you know it, that went on for a while. And then AVOX was sold back to the British, and DTCC then allowed the Clariot system to be purchased by Thomson Reuters. So all of that was purchased back to London, and now they had incorporated all the Know Your Customer databases from essentially all over the world. And that was allowed to go back to Reuters in London. Now, if you look at the history of Reuters, one of the things you're going to find is a flurry of thousands of names with Reuters in it and other subsidiary companies. But here's the real key mechanism there. These companies were ultimately controlled by something called the Reuters Founder Share Company. And that sounds uncannily similar to the Queen's Golden Share, where she's got one share of stock, or he, in a corporation like Serco, and is allowed to control policy for that entire organization. So the Reuters group had this founder share that was ultimately rolled up to the Rothschilds. And there's a particular man who was assigned to run that, and his name is Pierre G. Gillenhammer. And he was very clearly the keeper of the Rothschilds' golden share in Reuters to this day, or whomever. He's getting kind of old now, so they've probably assigned it to somebody else. But if you look at the Gillenhammer's background, he was involved with the formation of the World Economic Forum, the Trilateral Commission, he was involved with, pardon?
Bilderberg?
Yeah, he was involved with Bilderberg. He was involved with General Alexander Haig in the Nixon administration. He was an associate in the Kissinger organization, which means he was tied to the Rockefellers. So we're talking about a very deep pilgrim here, was assigned by the Rothschilds to keep their golden share in Reuters. And now we see that this Clariot system is managing the whole Know Your Customer database for the entire planet out of London. Now, they may argue it's out of Canada, but you might as well say London if you say Canada, because that's part of the Commonwealth. And so the disturbing thing here is that American financial and economic and business and commodity trading across the globe is controlled out of a database in London. Now, I used to build databases, and one of the things if you are the programmer who programmed the database that's managing all this data, you have a lot of power, because you can easily go in and say, if 0 means yes, or if 1 means yes and 0 means no, how easy is it to cut off you, Douglas, from a banking transaction? All you have to do is put a 0 in there, and it says no, and then your transaction's dead. So we are looking at something that I didn't expect to see, because I thought it would come out of Facebook and the social networking crowd. What we're seeing is this Know Your Customer database is, in fact, the database that's going to pull all the social credit score information into it, and therefore manage every person on the planet. And that's what this database has in it. Anybody that's done a transaction of any kind is in this database.
Yes, and we have discussed the conspiracy theory that I had come across, that there's, I'm going to exaggerate this just for the point, that there's one computer that runs the Aladdin program, and that all high-frequency traders who pay, $50 million a year to be able to go into that system and work with that system, which DTCC runs off of, the Depository Trust Clearing Corporation. So ICE, who owns the New York Stock Exchange, allows the high-frequency traders, bankers and brokers and asset management companies like Fidelity's the biggest. They go in and they make their own market, buy and sell before anybody else can get there. Now, that's bad.
By the way, even on some of the companies they own. So this is where the whole Glass-Steagall debacle created this a business where these guys could trade on their own accounts and play games in the marketplace, and nobody else would know what they're doing.
The owner of the New York Stock Exchange, ICE Incorporated, Intercontinental Commodities Exchange Incorporated, is traded on the New York Stock Exchange and others. But they control all of the clearing. They control every single transaction. And by the way, as you pointed out, this government monopoly, basically, the New York Stock Exchange, is unbankruptable because it would go to seed company, or is it seed and company? Seed company.
CD and company.
CD and company. CEDE and
Right.
company. And you look that up and you read it and you go, that's not possible. In a free market, that can't be possible, that somebody doesn't pay taxes all year long, and if they take the money out of the country before the year's up and then they hide it to say they lost other money, then they pay no taxes. That's what all hedge funds do. It's a gambling casino that is tax-free. Over a $1.25 quadrillion are exchanged yearly on the New York Stock Exchange. So when I found out ICE owned all of these exchanges, including derivative markets, including the carbon credit market that they started in 2010, and they own all these other companies that all feed into this, you go, but wait, this is a gigantic global fraud. This is one monopoly. But then I couldn't go any further with it. But you traced it all the way back to literally the very people. So you have a couple articles that are going to be coming out, you and the staff writers from Americans for Innovation, and they are blockbuster, folk. They are the proof that the Rothschild agents in the city of London have literally, for years and years and years, been in complete control of all economics. And they are the worst economic predators that anyone can imagine.
Here's a quiz for you. Who owns the London Stock Exchange Group?
You shocked me the first time you told me, and that's why it didn't stick in my brain. The LSEG.
LSEG is owned by Reuters.
That's right. Yeah, because it all rolls into all these.
So the Rothschilds control the London Stock Exchange.
And basically, ICE controls the London Bullion Market Association, which controls basically all gold and all silver and all precious metals, because they simply follow their daily spot price from ICE, which is calculating it from derivatives, from paper gold and silver, not from real. So the whole thing is smoke and mirrors.
Correct.
But they have it so tied up. This is the Gordian knot of our time. And it took you and your miners, and I joke, they all know I love them because I love dwarfs. And and they know that. And that's the reason you're in charge of them, because you're really big and they're really small. But they go so deep, because if you can't penetrate to these depths, you will never find this. I was so frustrated. I was hammering my head against the wall saying, I'm sure ICE controls the world, but I couldn't prove it.
The thing we discover now is whenever you look at what these people are doing, everything they do is convoluted, because they're paying more fees to attorneys and accountants to keep this muddled up that it's hard to figure it out. And if you don't spend a lot of time at it, as we have now done over these years, you won't know how to sort this out, how to straighten out that Gordian knot, as you said. But now what we see is that all these information exchanges, like the Securities and Exchange Commission and the London Stock Exchange and Companies House and the Securities Exchange Commission, all put out a lot of data in financial reports and directors' reports and things that I think the reason they do that is they've got to keep track of their own system. And as corrupt as it is, there are certain times they've got to give enough information out so that they can keep their own stuff straight. I think that's what's going on here. But in that, they don't disclose most of the information, but they always give away clues. And so our people have gotten good at following those clues. And now we can see, we actually have proof for everything we're talking about, that literally the Rothschilds control Reuters. And why Reuters? Because everybody thinks of it as a news agency. Well, from the beginning, it's always been about stocks, bonds, and banking from 1850 on. And you got to believe that once the Rothschilds realized the value there, they were never going to give it up, and they haven't. And so what we see today is the proof that a lot of these things that have always been called conspiracy theories had most of the truth in them, but the real confusing thing was how they relate to other people and other entities, like J.P. Morgan, like Chase Manhattan, HSBC, Barclays Bank. How all those related together is a muddle, and it's intended to be a muddle to keep most people out. But once you start looking for how they disclose their controls, it's possible for them through their own paperwork to figure out who the ultimate entity is that's controlling these thousands and tens of thousands of companies that are out there, many of them fake shell companies to hide a lot of these transactions all over the world. They know their system, and now, thankfully, the miners at AFI and AIM now know their system. And so I think the time has come. We've got to call out this demon, and we certainly see it as mammon because it's all about interest bearing. And while I'm on this subject, I really want to talk about something related to who caused this. Who's at fault here? Because if you look back at the history of the Rothschilds, you can see 1750 was about the time that they started loaning money out at interest for the Prince of Hesse and other monarchs all over Europe. So here we've got Khazarian Jews in the Rothschilds, on the one hand, loaning money out at interest. And on the other hand, you have all these kings and queens, Christian kings and queens all over Europe, out there readily and gladly taking these services from the Rothschilds. So the question is, whose default? Is it the chicken or the egg here? And what I think we're seeing here is it's neither. It's human beings who have failed to follow their higher selves, who have allowed our whole economic life to deteriorate into the domain of mammon. And it's been like that since the 1600s. But now what we see is their system of fiat currencies falling apart. They're trying to inject carbon credits to shore that up, and things are moving too fast now. And so one of the things that we saw in why we got involved, and that was our social networking invention was stolen. Now we can see that these people, when they saw our invention and the way it could scale, like they had never been able to scale with IBM technology prior to that, when they saw that, they decided they had to have it. And of course, our patent attorney was the mechanism by which that was accomplished. And then once they implemented the IBM Eclipse Foundation, they gave it away to everyone on the planet. And then Reuters was off to the races. And Reuters, as it's turning out, this news service, this communication system, this intelligence network, this mechanism for secretly controlling the world, was in the hands of the Rothschilds, and they're now attempting to perfect that in this great reset. That's where I think we are now. And that's why they needed social networking, because they never had, prior to that, a way of getting to every endpoint on the planet, meaning every person. And that's why Know Your Customer database makes sense, because every person on the planet who does any kind of banking or value exchange is in that database. Unlike Facebook, you don't sign up for Facebook necessarily, or Instagram or Yahoo. So you've got all these customers out there, but they're not centralized. This does make sense as the way they're going to centralize it. Now, in reading some of these paperwork documents on the authority of the Know Your Customer database, they have a little phrase, actually it's one word, and it's they are allowed to add enhancements to their database. So in other words, what they were tracking before, they're allowed to enhance it. So think of it this way. What if that enhancement that they go out and buy all the data on you in Facebook and Instagram and Google, they bring all of that data into the system, the KYC system, as an enhancement. That's the clever lawyer wording that we've seen all the way along that hides their true agenda. One word. You wouldn't think that would be the operative word, but in this case, I guarantee you it's the operative word. They've enhanced it to now it's going to be the mark of the beast.
Here's the one word I come up with. Dragonfly.
Yep.
Eric Schmidt's social credit system he implemented in China, told everybody it wasn't going to be done for 5 years. He left 5 minutes later. It was implemented in China. It's been implemented here, but we didn't know that the banking name of it. And we didn't
Correct.
know that Biden was going to mandate cryptocurrency. That is the key. Now, as you pointed out, and I'm so glad you said the word, intelligence. Reuters, Ryder Thompson, is an intelligence group. And when they were going broke, I believe they were either in the building for the London Stock Exchange or they were in the building next to it. But for sure, they were in the offices next to the Rothschilds. That's how they got to know each other. And then Rothschild says, well, you know, we manipulate with our intelligence organization. What happens if we have now one that's official, that's not associated with the Rothschild bankers? What could I do with that? If I'm a Rothschild, I could make markets.
Right.
And that's what they did. And they're there. Any corporation is only as good, especially big ones, as their intelligence department. That's what social media is. It's a backdoor into, like, instead of, you know, the TV trying to get information about us. No, we give it to them.
Correct.
We give it to them. For $4.50 a few years ago, I could buy your whole profile from Facebook. $4.50, including your nude pictures. Okay? So what do they do with that? They're going to add all of that together so that they can turn you off. If you don't have any money, and the social credit system, Dragonfly, this new know your customer social credit system, once it goes to a digital currency and there's no more cash, then they can play with those numbers all day long. There's
Correct.
nothing associated with it. It's not even credit.
I took my daughter out to a restaurant the other morning, and when I was getting ready to pay, I gave them $40, and they said, "I'm sorry, sir, we don't take cash." And I said, "You've got to be kidding. This is a local restaurant. It wasn't even a national chain." I said, "You don't take cash. We only take credit card." So there you go. If I had not known that, I wouldn't have gone. But that's how easy it is for them to cut you off. Just say no. We've got to storm our banks.
That's right.
Know your customer system is demonic.
And we give them our money, and then they think it's theirs. And
Right.
if you read the bottom line, it is theirs. You gave them money as a partner for them to invest for you. And if they go bankrupt, well, so do you. You don't get that money back. Now, you don't exist in America without a bank account. And you may, in the future, if Biden has his way, not exist without a U.S. Treasury cryptocurrency account, because that's where the universal income is going to come from. And so they can keep everybody home and just being a consumer and getting their money back that they actually just made up because they pushed a key on the keyboard so that it wasn't 1 billion, it was 1 trillion. That's how simple it will now be to manipulate the world currencies.
Just so you know, in the Know Your Customer database, they've already funded the companies that set up the system. That ID for you is universal. There is only one ID for you in the whole world. So they've already got it.
They already have in Sweden and in other places, Denmark, and the chip is here. The radio frequency ID is in your hand, and you walk into certain stores, get whatever you want, and walk out, and then you get it charged digitally. You don't go through a cashier or anything like that. So there's no cash, and literally they know who you are. I stay in a lot. I don't go outdoors much. You know, you can dress me up, but you can't take me out. So I went on a trip, and so now the turnpikes take a picture of your license and send you a bill. So that you don't have to stop and pay a toll. So I just got my toll for going, on a trip to New York, and they send it to me. And now if I knew how to use QRS, I could go and I'd pay it, right? No, I'm going to send them a check. Because I think their system is also looking at my speed, and any minute it will be illegal to speed, and they will, like they do in Europe, on the Autobahn in Germany, you can go practically any speed you want. But if it says what the speed limit is, one over, and you get a ticket digitally because the camera's watching you. And that's the social credit system in China now. Boom. You think it's not going to happen in America? They've been building this up. We've been telling you for years about this now. We know exactly where it's happening. And don't forget Reuters, Thompson. You might say, yeah, but there's the Associated Press. They use AVID, ISIS management, which is...
Associated Press is Reuters.
It is.
If you go back to the first Imperial Press Conference in 1909, both Reuters and AP were there. And Associated Press is this supposed amalgam of organizations. But you got to ask who's driving the bus here. And it's Reuters that's driving the bus, not Associated Press.
Yes. And what you pointed out is so good. And I'm going to now go a little bit out there into the weeds. I'll try not to get too carried away. But what you have revealed is so amazing that I see it everywhere now. When in the old days, they used to call them the court Jew, because the court Jew was involved in usury. And what was usury? It was a sin. It was worshiping mammon. It was money from nothing, taking advantage of other people's disadvantage. They didn't have to borrow money if they weren't in desperate straits. And now you're going to charge them an interest rate.
Yeah,
okay?
Slavery.
It's slavery. And you oftentimes know by giving them more money than they even ask for that they sure can't pay it back, and now you have them and you control them. Okay, that's what the Jews did for these Christian monarchs. And so when you say who's at fault between the monarch and the court Jew, well, here's what I say. There were lots of, let's first go back in history. The Khazarians were the most undefeatable warriors on land. No one could ever defeat them. When they finally got defeated, they were
just so we help people who don't know who the Khazarians are. It was an empire between 750 and 950 in the area which is now Crimea, Eastern Turkey, into the steppes of Russia. It was an entire empire on par with the Ottoman Empire and the Byzantine Empire.
And in the dates you've given, because these are Turks and they go way back and nobody can even explain where they came from, but in the time period you're talking about, they were undefeated. So when they finally got defeated by everyone around them saying, we have to stop them, they did stop them. And then they said, look, we have to break all of you up and send you everywhere on diaspora, get you out of here. We can't allow you to do this again. So you have to choose either between Christianity or being a Muslim or being a Jew. They chose, most of them, to be a Jew. They're not Jewish. They're not Hebrew. They're not blood lineage.
They're not Semitic. They're not Hebrew, right?
And they immediately migrated, because they were forced to migrate, to the West. And they came to Germany and the northern German countries, and not so much into the Viking realm, because remember, on the water, the Vikings were undefeated.
They did go up to Finland and
Yes.
and the Baltic countries. But you're right, they didn't go all the way to Sweden.
And so when they came in, and they were Jewish, of course, they couldn't hold land. They couldn't own land. That's the rules. And the Sephardic Jews had already gone into Spain and had been there for a long time. And, you know, the whole Reconquistadors and the Reconquista was to try to get the Sephardic Jews out of Spain and moving on into France. And that war went on for a long, long, long time. So when the Khazarian Jews came into Germany, they mixed with the Lombards. And the Lombards and the Khazarians and pagan and or Jewish went down into Italy, started to absorb what was the banking system created in Venice based upon Jewish families. The Banco family, which banks are named after, was a Jewish family. The Rialto, which had its first bank, and they loaned money for usury, for interest. So once they learned that, they moved up and they went to northern Italy, and then they went to Switzerland. They became the Savoy line, because all these lines started to mix with these supposed monarchical lines. But hello, those lines, there's not a one of them that can actually swear that they're blood lineage of that line. Why? Because they're a leftover. It's kind of like the Windsors, who were never British and who only got there because a Hanoverian king took over Ireland, and then they got to absorb Britain underneath the Hanoverians, and you go, but wait a second, what do Germans have to do with the Brits? Why are the Germans ruling the Brits? And the Brits make a big deal about being Brits and the monarchy. The monarchy is what they all hid underneath.
Correct. All over Europe.
You can't look into into the monarch's business. You can't look into her bank account. You have to pay all of her taxes, and you have to pay all of her expenses, and you have to pay for their wars, and you have to pay for their whores, and you have to pay for their offshore accounts, because their companies, their corporations, rip off all 54 Commonwealth nations.
Okay, so you went from 1700s to current.
Yes.
So can you go back to the Lombards and the Khazars, because that's the origins of the Rothschild family.
So these are the most ruthless economic usurers, flying under the false flag of Judaism, so they're protected, but they're really Khazarian warriors. And when you look at them, they were in Frankfurt, was where they were in Hamburg, they were in Hanover, they were in Frankfurt. They were mostly German towns. The Fuggers came out of them, and the Wessers. Those are the first big bankers, and what were they? Lombards. And so they realized, oh, what the heck? If I can be a court Jew, even though I'm really a Khazarian pagan, and I can be antinomianism, I can actually believe, you're allowed to believe in Sabbateanism, that the 10 commandments are correct, but you're going to do the opposite so that the Messiah comes.
Right.
I mean, you're talking about demented.
Right.
That's what these people believe.
These are the people that embrace two false messiahs within Judaism.
Oh, yes. And they were the
Sabbaty and then Jacob Frank.
And they were the most...
and these weren't Hebrew Jews. That's the crazy thing here. See, we've always been confused by these people into thinking that we're talking about the Semitic peoples from the Middle East. No, we're not. We're talking about Khazarians.
And we're talking about court Jews.
And Lombards.
Who aren't Jews. And so I don't like to use the word Jew. Jew is a derogatory name based upon the tribe of Judah. I hate using the word Jew because it's simply derogatory. But you can't just say Khazarian. They have been bred down through a lineage of Judaism, hiding underneath the Shabbat, hiding underneath the fact that Jews do business with Jews, and they give them discounts. Okay, this is what everybody does. It doesn't matter what nationality you are. But in this case, they're not even Jews, and they're certainly not Hebrews, and they're not. The Zionists are a different type of a Jew who wanted to send the Jews to Israel. Here we have the Christian monarchs of Europe using that whole mentality and system for their own ends, and I argue against their people. So what we're talking about is an extremely evil system of greedy people who developed a sinful financial system that we are still lumbering under today. The First Reich was Rome. We still live in the shadow of Roman legalism, Roman politics, the Roman Senate, and the Roman baths, because that's the YMCA. We still live in that because the British have completely adopted. Matter of fact, they say that London is Rome reincarnated. Why? Because look at the legal system. The Queen has her own court. She can't there's nothing she can do wrong. Okay. The king, the queen, the monarch. And so these monarchs that continue, what a joke that any nation would allow this to continue to happen, to think that one being is more elite, more highly developed, or more connected to the divine right of kings. Complete and absolute nonsense. So who's at fault? They're the same people. Because they have good PR, Douglas. The Welsh and the Lombards came right on up, and what did they do? They went into the monarchy, and they took over most of the monarchy and the houses. And what were they really? They were just economic predators, using every excuse they could to slide in to make sure that the worship of mammon turned into literally them having total gluttony for wealth. It's gluttony, and then their pride. Look, the Rothschilds, you can ask them. Everyone says you're a conspiracy and that you're trying to take over the world. And what do they say? Yeah, if I can. I mean, they literally will answer you and tell you yes, or they'll laugh at you and look down at you. But it's the same look that a Rockefeller, a Rothschild, a Windsor, House of the Windsor, or any of the kings of England or of Holland or of Belgium, and a lot of them from Germany, it's all the same. These are the same people.
Right.
And who are they at war against? Everyone. So we just discovered, and I just, maybe you could even dwell on this for a minute and let people know how bizarre this is. I'm looking up the city of London today, and I realize that it's the only sovereign county that can actually have area outside of itself, the city of London, which is different than Greater London. And this little mile area, square mile, can actually have a part of it at a distance. And I didn't know that. And so Canary Wharf. And so the second I saw that, I thought, oh, this is the British East India Company where they used to bring in the slaves and the opium, and then the West East India Company where they came and tried to take over America. And basically it's south of London, right? So they have everything coming up. They're the pirates. They can stop anything coming into London. They can control London. And at the time that the British East India devolved into the British government, I think they literally sat back and said, shall we be corporate imperialists, or shall we sneak into the government and be hidden under, this is an analogy, under the skirt of the queen or under the protection of the king? And the king is infallible. You can't look into anything he does. He can do whatever. He can, if Parliament decides to do this, he can just dismiss Parliament. And anyone who says that the monarchy of Britain isn't in control is nonsense. So my point is, King Charles and his inside Privy Council, and we've named who those people are, literally do have interlocked directorships of the companies that control all markets, all commodities in the West. And now I looked and started, ICE controls Abu Dhabi. It controls Singapore. It controls way more than I even knew. It's unbelievable. I was going to say the West, but it's not the West. It's the whole world.
The whole world.
It's the whole world. And it's right there. You've revealed this, which includes currency. And boy, have we gone through an education trying to figure out currency, right? Boy, have we gone through an education trying to figure out commodities and metals. And boy, have we gone through, we just saw what happens when you look at stocks. It's all fraud. It all goes back to the City of London and the Canary Wharf, where I guess all of the culprits that you have named have their huge offices.
Oh, yeah. It's Barclays, KPMG, Reuters. It's a long list of corporations that are at the center of this corruption.
In the old
in Canary Wharf, in the old, actually, some of those docks are still there, and they've just renovated them into offices.
And so,
actually, was there a few years ago.
It used to be slaves, and by the way, I don't mean black slaves. I mean any color slaves,
right?
Coming through the British East India Company, the British West India Company, the British South Africa Company, and on and on and on. These corporations were carrying on the evil enslavement of the world because what did they do? They took the Templar Red Cross on the white background, which was supposed to represent, we protect your pilgrimage to the Holy Land. And they put a sword up in the corner, which means, which I always said, but I didn't notice this till today. The British East India Company was commerce with a sword. Holy Lord, it's literal. It's literally on their shield. It's on their escutcheon. And it's, what else is on their escutcheon? 2 dragons, not just one dragon, not the red dragon, 2 dragons. In other words, they're basically saying they are the beast and they're the dragon of the apocalypse. And they brag about it by putting it on their escutcheon and stealing the Templar symbol and putting the sword on there. What a horrifying, clear statement of their own propaganda, which then makes them probably feel as if they're
well. And I
justified.
think that's the key. That's the key issue here related to banking, and it's kind of contradictory in a way to think of propaganda. What's the relation between propaganda and banking and currency? Well, now we can see that they're all fused together, and that the ultimate driver is propaganda, because that's what you tell other people. And that's why Reuters, it does make sense in a very convoluted way that Reuters is the one driving the bus here for the Rothschilds, and that they are achieving the what they started in the 1750s. So they're achieving their 300-year goal of world domination through banking by consolidating all of American activity. I mean, think of the genius of that they've not only consolidated all of our commodity trading, but they've now consolidated all of our currency and securities trading into a database that doesn't even exist in America. I mean,
that's the treasonous.
How much worse can it get?
It's so treasonous, and everyone who associates with it, that learns these things, that doesn't whistleblow on it, is part of that.
Right, and here's where I think, I just thought of this while we're talking. The ultimate driver of the Know Your Customer database are our bankers, our local bankers. That's the outer workings of this system. Those bankers have to cooperate with asking all these intrusive questions of us when we try to do transactions. And that's where I think, being local, we should push back on them and make them the bad guys and make them start pushing the message up through the chain. We're not going to do this. We're not going to do this.
And what does the bank supposed to be? Based upon trust, that you trust them to hold your money, trust them to invest it wisely, trust them to get returns so that they can give your money when you ask for it. What do we find out now? You go into a bank, they don't trust you at all. Oh, right. My heavens, you can't. Sometimes there's been times that we haven't been able to get money out of the bank. Or sometimes, you give them a check and they go, oh, no, this is going to take more than 5 days to clear. Oh, no, you can't send money out of the country. Oh, no, you can't do that. Who are you sending that to? Is that a relative? Can you demonstrate to me that it's being sent to a... Oh, this is fascism.
Right. They're asking what it's for.
Oh, they always ask what it's for.
I say to them, none of your business.
Well, I go to the same little tiny bank where I'm always the only person in there, and they all know me. And the only time I go there is moving money to my daughter's account, which that's what good dads should do. Just move money to their daughter's account, right? She's going to school. So I don't go to banks much, but the point is I don't exist without one.
Well, I mean, you can't do business in this country without regular transactions with the bank, and they've become this fifth wheel on all operations right now, where you truly are being told you don't control your money.
And the credit card is, we can't exist without a credit card, whether it be a bank card or some kind of plastic money. And then your credit score determines whether you can even get a house. It determines your life, whether you like it or not in the economic world. And then if they don't give you money anymore from banks, and you have to have either a credit card or a RFID in your hand or a hydrogel in your arm or whatever, or else you don't exist, what do people do? Well, I got to do it. Well,
I think what we have to do is insist on diversity of currency. We can't have just one of anything. That's the ultimate power corrupts. Ultimate power corrupts, absolutely. We have got to stop this. Every person in this country has got to make a run on their bank and say, we're not going to do this. Stop that KYC stuff and start making noise until the whole system starts to shake.
Well, you can't trust these people, okay? We know that. We've proven that. So the credit is all based upon trust. So America only leads the world because there's the trust that people buy our bonds.
By the way, here's a picture of the guy we're talking about.
Holy cow.
That's the keeper of the Rothschild founder shares in Reuters.
Oh, Mr. Gillenhammer. He looks like the hammer. So, and look at his willpower. Look at those earlobes. Holy moly, he's all will. He's the hammer, that guy. So what they're saying to you is you don't exist unless you have these things, and it has to leave your country before you buy or sell on the New York Stock Exchange. Has to go to the old York. Excuse me. It has to go to London before it can be cleared, and then it has to be measured against whether or not the high-frequency traders would lose or gain in that exchange, and or if they could get there first, or if somebody really started buying, well, they would know first. They'd stop that person. Go. So all of it, currency, we just saw the biggest currency fraud in the world that I've ever seen is moving of gold out of the New York Fed to foreign countries that we supposedly owed them for currency exchange. That's not true. That's a lie. So, but we pointed the commodities element of that. But when it goes back to it, money is literally sinful unless you use it properly. So these people have become, whether they know it or not, by serving this 100-year, 300-year plan in some cases, they are serving one of the oldest demons on the face of the earth that started in Babylonian times, when they started coining money and letting debt be created based upon usury and creating then debtors' prisons, because that's what it always leads to. In the old days in Greece, coinage was used to represent grain stored. Temples were where they stored things, real things. And then they were used then also as offerings to the temple. So then the temple started being corrupt. They said, oh, we have this magic device over here. We want you to offer a water offering to this goddess. But to do so, you have to take only our temple coin and put it in the machine, and then magically water comes out. And that was a miracle to those people. So the priest said, well, these people are stupid. We can take advantage of this. They're giving us their grain money by giving us the coins. In Jesus' time, what did he do? He took off his belt and he chased the money lenders out of the temple. Why? Because that's not trust. That's not faith. And we don't need fire offerings. And we certainly don't need to pay. Sorry, in this case, they were Jewish. You don't need to pay the Jewish money mongers, the money lenders in the temple. They shouldn't even be in the temple. And it's just a ripoff. And you're using the temple's sanctity again to draw people in, to manipulate them, to steal of their wealth. In other words, their store, their grain, whatever it is that they did with their efforts, with their works. And it was simply a way of trading fake coins, fiat currency, for real goods. The same exact thing is happening right now.